Hey everybody, Tony here with a review of Bizet's Carmen, which was shown at the Deutsche Oper Berlin. The conductor was Giuseppe Finzi. The production was by Sören Schumacher. The set design and costumes were by Pierluigi Samaritani. The lights were handled by Ulrich Niepel. The chorus master was William Spaulding, and the children's chorus master was Christian Lindhorst. Now, Georges Bizet's Carmen is one of my most favorite French operas of all time. In fact, if I were to do a ranking of my most favorite French operas, it would be this. Carmen would definitely be at number 1. Number 2 would be at Tales of Hoffmann. Number 3 would be Le Troyant. Number 4 would be Les Huguenots. Number 5 would have to be La Juive. Number 6 would have to be Faust. Number 7 would have to be Morel. Number 8 would have to be Romeo et Juliette. Number 9 would have to be Manon. And number 10 would have to be Werther. Yeah. It basically is so up there as one of my most favorite French operas of all time, and it's not hard to see why, because of the music and the story. The story is so full of romance, passion, and a lot of fire, basically speaking. You have this romance going on between Carmen and Don José, and then Carmen and Escamillo, and at one point in the opera, Don José and Micaela. I thought, wow, this is definitely an opera that's full of fire. In fact, this opera was also based on Prosper Mérimée novella of the same name. Now, there were some deviations from the original novel. Now, Carmen didn't see her death through the cards in the original novel, but in the original novel, she basically foretold her death after seeing a hare run between the legs of a horse. And Carmen was killed by 3 people, including her own husband, but not Don José. And there was a young matador, not by the name of Escamillo, but by the name of Lucas. The roles of Dancaire and Remendado were more significant, and Micaela was not in the original novella. So yeah, there were basically some deviations made to this opera. But this has become one of my most favorite operas, and it's become the audience's favorite operas of all time, and it has gained a lot of popularity. In fact, my first experience with hearing Bizet's Carmen was basically through 2 of my favorite cartoons, Hey Arnold in the episode What's Opera Arnold, and Tom and Jerry, the Gene Deitch era, with Carmen Get It. Yeah, I basically heard the overture, the habanera, and the Toreador song. Now, with What's Opera Arnold's case, the habanera was sung by Ruth, Helga, Arnold, and then the rest of the kids. And then the Toreador song was sung by Curly. And I thought that that episode was just one of the most creative and the most hilarious episodes I've ever seen in Hey Arnold. And with Tom and Jerry's Carmen Get It, sure, at times it was weird, but it was still quite fun to watch as opposed to the other episodes of that era. So yeah, that's how I managed to get acquainted with this opera. And then I started listening to Rizé Stevens' Habanera, and I definitely loved her smoky timbre. It's no wonder why she was the American Carmen at that time, and that Jussi Björling singing the flower song, La fleur que tu m'avais jetée, and I loved that rendition. I also listened to a few excerpts with Jesse Norman in the title role, Neil Chekhov as Don José, Mirella Freni as Micaela, and Simon Estes as Escamillo. Then, when I was 14, I bought a CD with Marilyn Horne in the title role, James McCracken as Don Jose, Tom Cruise as Escamillo, and Adriana Maleponte as Micaela. And I really, really loved that recording. And on the podium was Leonard Bernstein. And the excerpts with Carmen, with Jesse Norman, Chekhov, Estes, and Frenny was with Seiji Ozawa at the podium. So, yes, I really enjoyed this opera, and it's very easy to see why. With such very well known musical numbers, like the overture, which is so thrilling and so exciting, to Carmen's sinuous habanera, you know, the one that goes, L'amour est un oiseau rebelle que ne le peut apprivoiser, et c'est bien avec qu'on l'appelle celui qu'on vient de refuser. Oh, yes. That is one of the most well known arias in this entire opera. And then we have Don Jose's poignant flower song, the one that goes, La fleur que tu m'avais jetée dans ma prison m'était restée. Oh, yes, it's extremely beautiful. I really enjoy listening various renditions of this poignant tenor aria. And then we have Escamillo's swaggering and virile toreador song, the one that goes Toreador on guard, toreador, toreador. Oh, yes, absolutely fantastic. And then we have Micaela's Je dis que rien m'épouvante. Absolutely gorgeous. So, yes. And my personal favorites definitely have to be Carmen's, Mercedes's, and Frasquita's Chanson Bohème, Le Triangle de Six Terre. You know, the one that goes da 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 avec un écho métallique. You basically heard this in this episode of Sylvester and Tweety's Mysteries, where Granny, Sylvester, and Tweety are in Spain and they're basically solving this mystery involving what happened to one of the bulls at the bullfighters arena. Yeah, and you basically hear this musical number being played in the background. But my personal favorite definitely has to be the quintet the sextet with it's a quintet, excuse me. Yeah. With Don Caille, Remendado, Mercedes, Frasquita, and Carmen. Nous avons la tête d'une affaire. I definitely love their dynamics in this quintet, as long as the right singers sing this. So yes, this is why Bizet's Carmen has such a special place in my heart. Not only was it the first opera that I've heard based on some cartoons that I've been watching as a kid, but it has a lot of wonderful music and it has such fantastic characters and a very engaging story of passion and jealousy and all that type of stuff that you'd usually find in any Verismo opera nowadays. Now that that's out of the way, let's go on to what I think about the production. Now, the production I thought was just very beautiful. It really stuck to the libretto, with it being set in the late 1800s, and I definitely loved everything about it. The lighting especially stood out for me, as it definitely had this cinematic feel in which the spotlight shining over characters like Carmen and Don Jose definitely feels like a close-up, an extreme close-up of, let's say, Carmen or Don Jose. It definitely heightens that dramatic moment. And the costumes were all beautiful. I especially love Carmen's costume in the fourth act. It was just that gorgeous. And Micaela pretty much stays in the same costume from the first act up until the third act. And it makes me wonder why she didn't wear the shawl in the third act since it's pretty cold. But anyways, it's basically the people behind this production's decision. So overall, there were no gripes about this production. I thought it was just flawlessly beautiful, and the singing was especially flawless. Now, Carmen is a role that has attracted so many singers throughout the past, whether they be dramatic sopranos, dramatic mezzos, lyric mezzos, and in some cases, a few contraltos within the mix. It's basically what I consider to be a Falcon role. You could check out my other videos, namely my reviews of Le Donation de Faust and Le Toyant, to get a definition of what a Falcon is. So yes, Carmen is what I easily consider to be a Falcon role because she not only sings a lot of low notes, but she has some high notes as well, mainly a few high A's, one B flat that's usually interpolated, and a B that's also interpolated. And like I said, it's attracted a lot of fantastic singers throughout the past, like Suzanne Joyol, Suzanne Brolly, Jean Rode, Regine Crespin, Regina Resnick, Eva Randova, Christa Ludwig, Waltraud Meyer, Hedwig Fassbender. The list basically goes on and on and on and on. And also Shirley Verrett, Grace Bumbry, Gail Gilmore, Dunya Feitsovich, um, Jane Castleman, and yeah, that's pretty much the interpreters I can think of that were fantastic. And in the Italian side, you had Giulietta Simeonato, Fiorenza Cosotto, Fedora Barbieri, Ebe Stignani, Gabriella Besansoni, Irene Mingini Cataneo, and Chloe Elmo. Oh, and also Elena Nicolai, lest I forget about her. They have been all fantastic interpreters of Carmen. And tonight's Carmen was basically Beatrice Uria Monzon, the public's favorite Carmen of the late 20th, mid 21st century. Now, it's no wonder why fans and critics alike really love and admire her performance as Carmen throughout the years, within the span of, let's say, 20 plus years that she's performed this role. She really gets into the character. Physically speaking, she has a tanned complexion. She's slim and sexy. She basically has a lot of Hispanic features that makes her Carmen incarnate, so to say. She definitely really gets into the character really, really convincingly. She's able to portray Carmen's devil may care nature, her very coquettish nature, her somewhat dangerous nature, and her romantic side very convincingly. Especially in the fourth act, where at times the usual Carmens would just turn away from Don Jose with such disgust, but here she's simply telling Don Jose, you know what, I will say this very nicely, but we should just be friends, okay? We've had this going on for a very long time, but I don't think it's gonna work for us, honey. So I'm just simply gonna see Escamillo because, well, at least he's not that clingy as compared to you in that sorry state of yours. So I'm just gonna go at him, okay? Just understand me. Yeah. That's pretty much the subtext of what Madame Uria Monzon was simply trying to give in the fourth act. I thought it was very convincing. She definitely gave such a beautiful and very, very emotional, fiery portrayal of Carmen. It's definitely no wonder why this is actually her signature role. And this is why I really love her in a lot of these seductress type of characters. You know, the ones that are very sexy and basically want the tenor for themselves. roles like Charlotte from Werther, though she's actually a very sweet person and very torn between the two men that she loves so much. Dulcinea from Don Quixote, Ximena from Le Cid, Didon and Cassandra from Le Toyon, Venus from Tannhäuser, Amneris from Aida, Eboli from Don Carlo, Margaret from Le Wadis, and nowadays Madame Uria Monzon is performing the soprano roles of Tosca and Santuzza, but she's also performed the soprano role of Giulietta from Tales of Hoffmann for several years, and not just Carmen. It really shows just how fantastic Madame Uria Monzon is in these type of roles. And just to quote Jessie Norman of how she felt about Carmen, she basically stated that Carmen is basically a very fickle, finicky, independent type of character. She can be coquettish when she wants to, and she can be quite unmerciful. And she's definitely a lot more different than Aida. Yeah, that's how fantastic Beatrice Uria Monzon was as Carmen. She really got the character to a T, to the point where she is Carmen. She's actually been performing this role for 20 something years, and it just shows you how magnificent she was at her craft. Now, vocally speaking, sure, her voice did lose a bit of that luster throughout the years, mostly because of the fact that she's also singing a little bit of the heavier repertoire, but it's still a beautiful and very powerful instrument. It was just that emotional. The high notes were clean and crisp, and they were ringing. I especially love the high C that she did with Roberto Alagna, and they basically had such fantastic chemistry. So, yes, even though her voice kind of lost a bit of that luster from yesteryears, it's still a very gorgeous and very well controlled instrument, and a very powerful instrument at that. And her acting was just so spot on. Roberto Alagna as Don Jose. Need I say anything more about Roberto Alagna being one of my most favorite tenors of all time? He's absolutely fantastic in this role. He was visceral as Don Jose. He had a ferocity that made Don Jose a very type of man that really is resonant with how men are in Verismo operas. All blood and guts all around, all fire and passion. They have drive. They basically want the girl for themselves. And that's pretty much his portrayal of Don Jose. It was a very energetic and very hot-blooded portrayal of Don Jose. Every moment that Mr. Alagna had as Don Jose was just pure gold. It was just that thrilling. Like I said, his voice is definitely very thrilling. It maintained that thrilling aspect with such explosive high notes and a very charismatic stage presence. It's no wonder why I definitely love Alagna as an artist. He was that fantastic as Don Jose. Sure, you can say what you will about his little incident as Radames in 2006, but as an artist, he's absolutely fantastic, and his portrayal of Don Jose really shows just how fantastic he was vocally and dramatically. He had such a huge dramatic presence on stage, and his chemistry, as I've mentioned, with Beatrice Uria Monzon was simply put epic. And I basically had a little chat with Seth, and he stated that both Alagna and Monzon are really great friends in real life. Heck, they were also Didon and Aîné from Le Toyon, and at one time they were also Santuzza and Turido from Cavalleria Rusticana. So it really shows just how much of fantastic chemistry these two artists really have, and they really fired it up with the evening. It was never a boring moment with these two. I felt that Beatrice Uria Monzon as Carmen and Roberto Alagna as Don Jose were two of the best performers of the evening. More than that, they were the best performers of the evening. They absolutely stood out. They blew every performer out of the water. They basically stood out very well and very convincingly. With such dramatic voices and equally dramatic stage presences, I definitely got drawn in by their performance, and it's no wonder why these two have been so prolific throughout the years, because they've had such fantastic techniques. And the repertoire that they've both chosen, simply put, was just fantastic. It had a lot of challenges, but they were able to overcome these challenges with such great chemistry, great vocal techniques, and magnetic stage presences. So yes, Godspeed to the both of them for such fantastic performances, and I wish them a lot more years to come. So yes, with such fantastic, astounding, and very outstanding performers like Alagna and Beatrice Oyamozon, what about the others? Well, they were also fantastic as well. Elena Talagova, who I saw last night as Gilda, gives a very sweet and very delicate performance as Micaela. Now, it's no surprise for me that Miss Talagova is a soprano who specializes in a lot of ingenue roles, like Susanna, Zerlina, Despina, Pamina, Servilia, Gilda, Nanetta, and in some occasions Oscar and Musetta, and also Lisette. Here I thought she was just lovely. She had such a beautiful and delicate timbre to her voice. In fact, I pretty much prefer a light lyric soprano singing the role of Micaela. Sure, there were a lot of full lyric sopranos singing Micaela, like Barbara Frittoli, Kiri Takanawa, Yulia Faradi. Sure, I do like their voices, but for me, I actually prefer a light lyric soprano voice. In fact, how old is Micaela? She's basically 17 years old. 17. So usually for a teenager, I would like to have a light lyric soprano sing Micaela. And Elena Talakova did a very magnificent job. She was way better this time. Now, that's not to say that her performance as Gilda was bad. I thought it was just beautiful all throughout. Go check out my Rigoletto review if you haven't watched that already. I basically said a lot of fantastic things about Elena Salagova's performance as Gilda. Here, as Michaela, I thought she was a lot better, but still she maintained that very beautiful timbre and had such very beautiful comet-like high notes and a very sweet stage presence. Now, Bastian Efrink as Escamillo, I thought was way better this evening. I didn't really care for his performances as Klingsor or Monterone because I thought his Klingsor was a bit too light. The same thing can be said about Monterone. But here as Escamillo, I thought he was a lot better. He basically had a ferocity as Escamillo, and his voice was far more suited into this role. Sure, as much as I would have wanted to have a deeper voice, here I thought he was absolutely fantastic as Escamillo. He had this ferocity, this virility, this macho nature that makes Escamillo so magnetic. He was so dramatic in his presence and in voice. And I definitely felt that this is actually Mr. Everink's best performance this far. So, Godspeed. I really hope to see more of him. And then we have Mercedes and Frasquita, sung by Christina Zidak and Shaban Stagg, who I also saw as Rigoletto, as the court lady, and the Countess Soprano. Here, I thought their voices blended beautifully. Sure, in the case of Mercedes, I would have wanted to have a light lyric soprano voice or even a coloratura soprano sing Mercedes. But as it is, all tastes aside, Christina Zedek definitely gives a very beautiful performance as Mercedes. She basically makes Mercedes a pretty straight person who's pretty much a straight thinker. And her voice is just that delicate and beautiful. It definitely has this plush type of timbre, and her stage presence was equally as magnetic. Siobhan Stagg as Frasquita was absolutely gorgeous. She still has that silvery, light lyric soprano voice, and she was able to make Frasquita a very fun, very jovial type of person. And I definitely love these two ladies' performance as the Gypsy Friends of Carmen. And then we have the fantastic John Chest as Morales. Even though he was in the first two acts, I definitely felt that he was absolutely fantastic. His voice is still that resonant and that beautiful and that virile all throughout the evening, and his stage presence was just as fantastic. Then Zuniga was sung by Seth Carrico. I definitely loved his stage presence. He was able to make Zuniga a very dignified, yet somehow a bit of a roguish character within the second act. But still, he was able to do a solid job with this character role, and he sang very beautifully. Within a few years' time, his voice would become a lot more resonant, a lot fuller. As it is, I definitely felt that his voice was pretty good all throughout, and he definitely gave such a great portrayal of a very thankless role like Zuniga. Then we have Don Caillo and Remendado, sung by character tenors Jörg Schöner and Gideon Poppe. I felt that these two had such great dynamics, and I really love a character tenor singing the role of Don Caillo. Sure, a lot of character baritones and a lot of light lyric baritones have sung the role of Don Caillo throughout the past, but I prefer a light lyric tenor singing the role of Don Caillo. With Jörg Schöner as Don Caillo, I definitely really loved the timbre of his voice, and I definitely like his stage presence. Gideon Poppe as Remendado is a little bit smaller than that of Schöner's, but it's still a beautiful instrument all throughout. These two definitely had such great chemistry, and they were basically a lot of fun to watch. And the smaller roles were handled very well too. Marek Pitch and Aram Yun as the soldier and Andrei sang very well. So overall, there was a lot of outstanding singing all around, whether it's from the mains to the supporting cast and to the cameos. Everybody did fantastically. They were all in their A game. They all sang beautifully. They sang powerfully. They sang magnificently. It was just a grand tour de force all around. The conducting was pretty good all throughout. Sure, there were some times that the conducting was a little bit delayed in terms of how it got in sync with the singers and the conductor with the orchestra. But overall, I definitely loved the brisk pace of the overture and Carmen's quintet. And it was also quite noticeable that he started off the L'Étrangle de Sistrata musical number at first with this sinuously slow pace, and then the pace starts to pick up within the second part, and then it picks up even more within the third act, or excuse me, the third section. I thought that was quite interesting because I was more used to listening to the chanson bohème with a fast pace all throughout, but listening to the build up from being slow and sinuous to picking up the pace even further was a lot more exciting. It actually made me anticipate a lot more. So, yes, the conducting was solid all around, and the chorus was just beautifully sung. The children's chorus were all in their A game as well as the adult chorus. So, overall, this was just fantastic. This is another fantastic production that I have seen at the Deutsche Oper Berlin, with such a very colorful production, with the lighting being used for a cinematic effect. And outstanding singing all around, the standouts being Alagna as Don Jose and Beatrice Monzon as Carmen. Great conducting and a great chorus. This was absolutely a fantastic evening for opera. If you haven't seen Bizet's Carmen already, then I highly suggest you go check it out. You will not be disappointed by such fantastic performances, mostly coming from Roberto Alagna and Beatrice Monzon. In fact, all of the cast did magnificently. So you're gonna hear a lot of fantastic singing from the mains, the supporting cast, and the cameos. So go check it out. You will never be disappointed. And I'm sure that you will love the singers and really, really get into their performances very well. Well, that's all for now, and it's 5 more days until my reviews, concerts, and opera reviews in England and Amsterdam. So definitely look out for those as well. So yeah. Until then, this is Antoni signing off and wishing you all a good night.